Hey, what's up, everybody? This is episode 18 of the One Question podcast, where we unpack some of life's most difficult questions, looking at through a spiritual lens. I'm David with my co-host Lindsay.
Hey, everyone.
And we're joined by Pastor Michael.
Hey, everybody.
What's up, man? How you doing?
Good.
Good.
Ready to rock and roll.
Good.
All right. Well, hey, you guys, we're so glad y'all are joining us. Wherever you're at in your journey and however you got here, maybe someone sent this to you. Maybe you just stumbled upon us on Spotify or YouTube. We're so glad. Maybe you are spiritually curious. Maybe you are wondering who God is and why he exists or if he exists. Maybe you're new to faith and taking your first couple steps, or maybe you've been walking with Jesus a long time and you're hoping that this podcast will bring in just some more answers for you as you walk with him. Whatever that looks like for you, we're so glad that you're joining us and hope this conversation helps you really take a step forward.
That's right. That's right. And typically when we ask a question, that often leads to other questions and creates more conversations. So we're really looking forward to diving into this question today. I know I'm really excited about it. Today's question: why should I want to go to heaven?
Ooh.
And
It's legit.
I think that as a quick sort of sub-question of that, what are some common misconceptions that you hear people say about heaven, or that you have felt about heaven?
Well, see, I want to pause real quick because I thought that the question we were going to ask is, do all dogs go to heaven? And I was so prepared to talk about that.
I think your question was, do all cats go to heaven? And the
Absolutely
obvious answer is no on
not.
that one.
Yeah.
The answer is all of them do, and they're so loved, and I just love cats. So sorry, what was the question, David? Why should I want to go to heaven? Yeah, I think it's great to start with what are some of those common misconceptions. I know for me, when I was younger, I assumed that when I died, I would become an angel and get pretty wings, and I would go sit and hang on the clouds and shoot hearts at people. Maybe that was like a Cupid Valentine's Day thing I had in my head, but I just thought it would be sweet and there would be harps, and
It makes a lot of
it sounded
sense.
nice, but it wasn't that exciting. It was just kind of like, that sounds calming. Like,
Right.
Yeah.
That's a good 5 minutes worth of work. And after that, you're maybe
Yeah.
looking for something else.
Yeah,
Exactly.
to be completely honest, I always thought heaven sounded so boring. Like,
Yeah.
I couldn't decide. I know I was told that I needed to go there because the other place obviously was
we
worse.
can't speak of HE double hockey sticks.
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly.
We
But
just type it into calculators and show people.
it seems so boring. I had these ideas of like, we just sit around in robes, kind of like we're at a really awful toga party, and roll, not even throw, because throwing would be like unruly, but roll an inflatable beach ball. I don't know why, that was what's in my head, and it was scary to me because it sounded awful.
Yeah, it sounds like a deflated rave party.
Yeah,
Is
it was
basically what
terrible.
that sounds like.
Yeah.
What about you, Michael?
Yeah, I'd say the same. I mean, I think you could see them in like cartoons and stuff, right? Where everybody's sitting around on clouds. There's a harp somewhere.
Yeah,
Right.
absolutely.
Somebody's got a harp playing it.
And you can just magically play it when you get to heaven.
Right. Even you can take a break and talk to someone and it still
And
just
it's
keeps
still
playing.
playing.
Right. There's that kind of stuff where you just, that was, I think, the popular thing I think most people probably grew up with. I grew up that way too. But I think it's funny because it's like things that we kind of gain from either pop culture or different place in our life. But when you really dive into like the story that we're talking about and what we actually believe as followers of Jesus, I think it's a very different picture in a lot of ways, because we're talking about the difference between some kind of existence we go to that's it's a bunch of spirits floating around and it's like a nice place for ghosts to go.
I love ghosts. That sounds so fun. Like a
Okay.
haunted mansion.
Right.
Let's keep talking about what we
remember,
want
everybody
heaven
has
to
a
be.
mansion,
Cats and mansions and
That's
ghosts.
right.
Because mansion is the other one that's usually brought
Yeah.
out like, oh, I'm going to get my mansion when I go there. And it's funny because, again, when you get into the Bible, there's not a whole lot there to draw those pictures from. So it's really interesting. And so I'm glad we get to talk about this because we get to kind of hopefully slice through some
Yeah.
of those things.
So before we talk about what heaven actually is, I do have a question. So should we want to go to heaven if we don't have a relationship with God? Or should
Right.
we want to go to heaven just to, like David was talking about earlier, just to avoid hell?
Right. And I think this is where we have to start is I think the question of, do we want to go to heaven or do we, I mean, no one I don't think would say the alternative.
I want to go. Yeah.
Right. No one I don't think would say that. But starting with that question even starts us on, I think, a wrong platform to start the conversation. Because even for those of us who are Christians, the question really isn't, do I want to go to heaven? Because the real question is, do we want to spend the rest of our eternity with God. Because
That's
the
awesome.
Bible itself never really paints heaven as this ultimate hope that we have. The ultimate hope we have is that we get to start our journey with Jesus here, but then that just continues on for eternity, and it can look very different. So I think the question we really have to get into a little bit is, really, do we want to spend eternity with God or not? I think that's the more accurate place to start.
Yeah, that's fair. And I mean, I have friends who don't know Jesus, and I think they still, though, would say, do I want to go to a place with fluffy clouds or a place
Right.
with fire? I'm going to choose the fluffy clouds, and I'll just
Exactly.
kind of like ignore the hubbub of God stuff. But I think what you're talking about is it's not just this nice place versus a bad place. It's a place with Jesus and a place without.
Right. And then we need to talk about next, what does that place look like?
Yeah, so
Yeah.
what is heaven? David, take it away.
Okay, everybody.
I
Here's
know
what
you have all
happens.
the wisdom over there.
No, I was going to say that for me early on in my life, I completely missed the relational aspect. Like I was just thinking about it in terms of where do I personally want to be, and didn't really focus on what that would look like to be in the presence of God. And I think that that's so odd that I completely ignored that aspect of it. And I still think that we kind of get caught up in that idea when we talk about like what actually is heaven. To me, I think that is the key. That's the most important thing. I mean, I would say surfing. Like there have to be good waves in heaven, right?
Otherwise, you don't want to go.
Right.
Right.
There
But
have to be cats,
Right.
plenty of them.
cats
Yes.
and waves. But the presence of God thing was something that I never really considered what that would look like until recently.
Yeah, and again, let's get into a little bit of maybe
What
why
is heaven,
what is
yeah.
heaven,
Yeah.
right? Because I think this will help us.
I have no
Jump
idea.
off of
That's
there.
why I said that.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know.
What's
We should know this.
right? Well, what's really fun is when you dive into the Bible, you realize how little it talks about heaven itself, because I think the biblical writers are making the point that it's really not. It is a place and it's important, but it's nowhere near as important as God Himself, or even what they actually say is the ultimate hope, which is actually the picture the Bible paints is that we believe that the earth right now and the people on it, all of us experience lots of suffering, lots of brokenness. We know that there's amazing things in life, but at the same time, we experience a lot of really rough things. I spend time out in the community sometimes, and here lately I've been spending time at a hospital with a hospital unit that's been working with COVID patients. That's not an easy day-to-day thing. So I think we understand that that's our reality. But the ultimate hope that the Bible paints is that there's going to be a day where God is going to step in and He is literally going to make everything in our world right again. And that was His original intention when He made everything. When we go to the beginning of the Bible and the first 2 chapters of Genesis, that He made a good world filled with good things for us to experience. Right? He didn't actually have to give us things like taste buds. He could have fed us a different way if it was really just about feeding. But He literally gave us a way to not just be fed, but also enjoy
Oh, that's so interesting.
the feeding. Like,
What would you
there's-
do if you couldn't taste Laffy Taffy? You know, that's the
Exactly.
first food that comes to mind that I'm like, what would I do if I couldn't taste it?
Laffy
Right.
Taffy, that's the one.
Laffy Taffy, that's the one. Write it down. Purple.
Right, and
My favorite.
there's so much good and beauty in the world, but so much of it gets overshadowed by the other things. But what would our world look like if we literally removed all the pain, the chaos, the suffering, the complications, the misunderstandings, the everything that we experience, and instead we had all the things that's here on this earth, but in its ultimate beautiful state that it was meant to be? Because that's actually how the Bible talks about it. And the way they use the language, they call it a new heaven and new earth. And even the word heaven there is a little tricky because the word heaven throughout the Bible predominantly just means sky. So it's just their way of saying everything, the earth and what's around it. That God will step in and make all that what it was always intended to be before things got complicated and messed up because of humans and what we've done with
Right.
what we've been given. So even for that person who doesn't know Jesus, the person who maybe you're searching, you're spiritually curious, I would say think about all those beautiful things that you enjoy in your life, the things that you live for today, whether it's hobbies that you do, whether it's something you do at work, or whether it's
Even
a
the
relationship,
relationships, yeah.
right, that you have. Think that what the Bible says is that after heaven comes what we call the renewed earth, a new heaven and new earth that God's going to put back together that includes all those things, but only so much better than what we can experience right now. That's what is waiting for us. But again, it's still just the byproduct, because at the end of the day, we get to spend that with God. But what comes with God is all those beautiful
Icing
things.
on the cake.
Right.
Okay, wait. I'm a little confused now. So, for
Yes.
clarity's sake, there is a difference between heaven and new heaven, new earth.
Right.
So, what happens when I die?
Yes.
Time
When
out.
we die.
Heaven now is the harps, right? That is what we're at.
Yeah. That's the hard part. I think over time we've adopted a lot of stuff from different time periods, where we ultimately think there's here and then there's
Eternity.
eternity. Like, and that eternity is only some kind of spiritual, floaty place for everybody to go. But the way the Bible talks about it is that that's not the ultimate reality. Now, there is a spiritual existence we go to with God when we die, if we have a relationship with Him. But that's only a temporary place that we're waiting for that time where He brings this back into what it's meant to be. So instead of, I think traditionally we think of it as this ultimate place that we're waiting to go to, and that's it. But really the Bible paints it as kind of a stop-off place, whereas that end result, that renewed earth, is the actual ultimate goal. Because this is why they talk so much about the fact that people will be brought back to life. Why we celebrate Jesus being resurrected from the dead. Well, why is that important? Well, because He's still in a physical body. He's going to be with us in that new place. That's our ultimate hope, is with Him.
So you
there.
talked a little bit about, like how there'll be no pain, no suffering, all the good things of earth. What are we going to be doing there the whole
Right.
time if we're not sitting on clouds?
Surfing. I thought we were already talking about
Surfing.
this.
David will be surfing.
In David's
The rest
heaven.
of us maybe have other responsibilities. And see, that's one thing that we can kind of speculate about, because there's really not a lot there. But I think a lot of times if you look to what was the original intention for us, all right, before the pain and suffering entered in because of what we call sin, brokenness, and into the world, we would say, well, God made the world for us to actually rule with Him, to bring about His goodness into creation for other people, and that included work. Because unfortunately, for many people, work is actually something that we were designed to do, wasn't a result after we messed up. It was actually, He put people in the original story into a garden and said, hey, work it and keep it, but not work as in break your back over it because it's so difficult. But think of like the enjoyment that some people get who love gardening, and they get to cultivate this space of beauty and abundance, and they get to bring new fruits or vegetables into the world that you get to enjoy. Think of that. Now, obviously, we don't have to sit around gardening. David can be surfing. But I think
too. It's okay.
like what if
Can't really see you gardening. You
Big
don't-
gardener.
Really?
Yeah, man.
I don't know.
like
Beg
you
to
physically
differ.
are a big gardener, or you
I mean,
like to garden?
I like to watch Morgan
Oh, there
work.
you go.
Yeah, I kind of.
So your wife is a good gardener.
She's a good
Yes.
gardener. Yeah,
And
yeah.
you sit with
That
a beer and
counts.
watch,
You're
and you're good
garden
at.
spectator.
We are one flesh, right? Is that how that works?
We can talk about that another.
Yes.
Another
But I mean, for me,
podcast.
I love, I really love sports. What if we could all actually have sports there?
Yeah.
But then who would lose?
Oh,
I
that's
mean-
a
Because there
great
can't be any
question.
sadness.
That's a great question.
But what
Another
if
podcast.
what if you could lose and it not be sad?
Oh,
Ooh. I know. See, this is where we're getting a
You're
theoretical.
so much smarter than me. Sometimes I just have to pause and wonder. No, but kind of going back to about like what we actually do in heaven. Like I agree. Like I think there will be work. I think there will be worship of God. I think there will be relationships with people. I think there will be eating and drinking
Yeah.
when we get to that new heaven, new earth. One quote I love from C.S. Lewis that I have in the front of my Bible. It says, "What it's talking about heaven." And it says, what would it be like to taste at the fountainhead, that stream of which even these lower regions have proven to be so intoxicating. So the sense of like those best moments we have on earth, like I remember the day we adopted my brother and I met him for the first time, or like my wedding day, or the day my sister had her first child, like those top moments, like those are just, a lower region of a stream. And like, what will it be like to be at the fountainhead of that, where that spring first comes forth? Like, that's kind of been my like soul connection to the new heaven, new earth, like what I hope and desire. And I think what God anticipates to create for us.
That's beautiful.
Right. And really, when you get down to it, if we believe that God is the one who created everything here, which we would agree to if you're following Jesus, then we also believe then God is the ultimate creator, which I know sometimes put as a category as like this thing that we just talk about as a title, but it's he's the ultimate creative person, the ultimate creative being. And we are kind of like tiny versions of that, right? Because we like to create new things. We like to play around and find new ways to do things. And but what if we got to do that with him for as long as we wanted to? Right. Because that's what you have eternity to explore art and to explore music and explore sports and relationship and food and
and it's like if God created the earth, there are so many amazing things. Surfing, who would have thought about that? Taste buds, like you said earlier. Like if that's what God gave us here in this broken world, like what new things, what other senses, like I can't even begin to imagine. I feel like it's going to be like Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory,
sensory
like,
overload
on steroids. Like it's going to be amazing.
I think that's really fascinating too, to hear that breakdown of the idea of what we often think of when we think of eternity, and then what the Bible says about the new heaven and the new earth. And so I think that's something that I guess I'd never realized until pretty recently. So I love the fact that the Bible has these sort of complex nuances that we often, I don't love the fact that we misinterpret it sometimes, but I love the fact that there's so much that you can constantly go in, rediscover, and learn anew. And I think that that's just another testament to that idea.
Right. And I think what this does when we really grasp onto this kind of paradigm is that it starts to help us to see how God is intersecting into what we experience right now. Instead of, because I think we can accidentally think of, there's these certain important things, and sometimes, especially as Christians, we can elevate what we call our spiritual things that we do, like our praying and, whatever weird thing that we do that the rest of the world doesn't quite get that we do. And then there's the work, and there's all
eating
our
and drinking,
right, and all
sleeping.
of those things. But what if what God's really been saying is that all of those things are a part of who He's made us to be, all of which we can experience Him, we can experience goodness. We can create that space for other people, and that all those things matter in our lives, not just the separate times out we can do those extra things, but what if your work and all those things are a part of our design that we can live out of, and that He's there with us. I think that's what the Bible really puts across for each of us, is that those things all matter. Absolutely. They're no longer these secondary things in our lives.
Yeah. So, there are probably some people listening to this podcast who have yet to make that decision to follow Jesus. And thanks for sticking it out and listening to us ramble and laugh and have some hard moments with this topic. But what would you say, just with some closing thoughts, to someone who's listening and is like, yeah, heaven sounds great, I just still don't know about this God thing. And like, I don't want to spend eternity in hell, but I'm not quite ready that I want to spend an eternity with God.
Right. I would say, first and foremost, that no matter what God is for you, I think the fact that we do experience so much good in the world is because God, no matter how bad we've made things sometimes in our lives and how humanity has made it, He has gone above and beyond to still show His goodness and His love for each one of you. The famous, even if you're not a follower of Jesus, you've seen people stand up at basketball games or something and have a big John 3:16 sign. That's like the telltale verse that we go with. But that verse literally does talk about that God loved the world so much that He gave Himself. He gave Jesus for our sake. And I think that what we're mainly always seeking is a a way for us to experience something that's beyond ourselves. And we don't usually come across that until we hit a place where we need that. And I think the pandemic that we've all been experiencing for so long has pointed us to our life really does need to be anchored to something. It needs to be anchored to something that is beyond us, because there's only so much we can control in this life. But I think that the ultimate hope that we're saying we believe in, and we hope that you make that decision one day to believe in, is that Jesus himself literally came to demonstrate what a true life of being a human meant, because he created each and every one of you. He knows you inside and out, and he still chose you. And his ultimate desire for you is to have a relationship with him, not because he needs something from you, but because he desires you. Mm-hmm. He desires that relationship with you so that you can experience things beyond our own imagination for eternity. Mm. So I think that's the beautiful picture that the Bible paints, that hopefully we as Christians can live in ways that shows that a little bit better here lately.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, David, Michael, thanks for joining us. And for y'all online, whether you're listening or watching, we are so grateful. Whether you're ready to make a decision to follow Jesus or not, we just hope that this One Question podcast continues to encourage you to keep asking questions. We love hearing from you guys. We love having these conversations. If you have a question, maybe something we talked about today brought up something else, and you're really wondering, can I lose a football game in heaven and not be sad? Right. We want to know your questions. Just email them to onequestion@beachchurchx.com, and we'll see you guys next week. Bye.
Bye, guys.